my screen shared.
Yes.
Boop. There we go.
All right. Yeah, so we watched
The,
Eurovision.
the Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams comedy that it feels redundant to call this a strange one. But it's a strange one.
Yeah.
Daniel, what's this movie about?
Okay. So this movie is about a couple named Lars and Sigrid. Lars is played by Will Ferrell. Sigrid's played by Rachel McAdams. They are from Iceland, and they have a love of music, which they shared from when they were kids, and they want to be a big singing duo, and they want to get on Eurovision, which is this big European singing competition. And of course, Will Ferrell's Will Ferrell. Lars is living with his father, who is played by Pierce Brosnan, and so they've kind of have to get going with their singing stuff, and they managed to get in by luck of the draw into the Iceland
Look,
uh,
yeah,
stage of it. Yeah.
literally the luck of the draw because, well, we have 11 qualified contestants. Well, we need a 12th by the rules. And just pull into the submission bag.
Yeah, they just literally just pulled their CD out. Yeah, yeah, and because that's of course it doesn't. They say, well, it doesn't matter because they have this one singer. I can't remember her name, but it was played by Demi Lovato, who's like, oh, she's going to be the star and she's going to win the whole thing. And of course, by the rules with Eurovision, whoever the winner is. The country that they're from is the host country for the next year's competition, and so the guy from the Icelandic bank is just like, I don't know if we can afford that.
Yeah, I believe the last time I looked it up, Iceland has a adult population of about 100,000 people.
Mhm.
Let's just go ahead and double check that. Demographics of Iceland.
Yeah, because I remember a few years back there was
Uh,
somebody mentioned that it's about the size of Corpus Christi.
yeah, okay. Just over as of 2022, the Icelandic population was just over 376,000,
Yeah.
with about a quarter of them of foreign background of some sort. Interestingly,
Yeah.
um,
Um, yeah.
but they were saying that the average attendance for a Eurovision show is about 500,000. So not really sustainable for them.
No, no, definitely not. But so Lars and Secret end up in the singing competition, and one of the gags in the movie is that every time they go up to perform, it just goes off the rails. Like something goes wrong,
Something
and
catastrophic happens.
right. And in this case with Iceland, when they're in Iceland, uh, Lars was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go talk to the lighting people," and then the lighting people are like, "You're on after her." He's like, "Oh
Yeah.
crap!"
Yeah, he showed up very late and fell off the stage, and
Yeah,
well, no, he fell off. Like they had these wires, and he fell out of his wires, I believe.
right. Yeah, yeah.
But
Um,
it all seems lost, and they're not going to get to be in the show, and it's just all miserable. And then the boat explodes,
yeah, yeah. The boat with all of the contestants on it blows up, and
except
they're
for them.
yes,
Now, my trope senses started to tingle, and I wondered if that had been an intentional thing by the banker.
yes, yeah, and I got that feeling too when when Lars and Sigrid end up going to Scotland to compete, and the banker's like, oh, that's like, well, they're really terrible, and like, oh, that's and the banker's like, oh, that's really good.
Yeah, uh, that I'll admit that was so obvious. I almost started wondering if it was a red herring of some sort, or just a random happenstance.
Yeah,
So let's take a step back. So we've laid the stage. We're set the stage.
yeah,
Um, I mean, okay. So Will Ferrell's character, the opening scene has them in the late 70s and his mother has died, and he's a small child, probably about 6 or so, I would think.
Yeah.
And they see ABBA singing Waterloo on TV, and he starts dancing along with it. And that's the moment when he declares that he's going to be in Eurovision someday.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so he brings his childhood um, love interest slash friend Sigrid along with him.
Mm.
Everyone thinks that he is weighing her down because he's just a loser and she's the real talent. But
Right.
but
Yeah.
she loves him because she was a mute child until he got her talking and singing.
Yeah.
And her mother's like, "Look, that was just Abba, but it was also him, mother, but it was mostly Abba."
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I was really thinking about the math on this.
Hmm.
It seems to take place in present year, so 2019, 2020.
Hmm.
Uh, if they were waiting to like trying to get into Eurovision from the you know that year until 2020, yeah, he objectively wasted her life until they got lucky.
Yeah. And hey, Ninja, good to see you. No, not quite a documentary.
Maybe in the same degree of accuracy as Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
So so he's a classic loser character, and his dad, played by one of the James
Yeah.
Bonds,
Pierce Brosnan.
Pierce
Yeah.
Brosnan. Thank you. Has no use for him. So it's a classic underdog story where you have somebody who seems like a huge loser who's just trying to prove themselves.
Yeah.
Now I will say that first off, Eurovision and the culture around Eurovision is kind of resistant to parody because it is so large than life and flamboyant.
Yes. Yeah. I noticed that.
Like just from having watched a few Eurovision songs and music videos over the years, none of these, and also just knowing things like various types of Europop, due to liking Eurobeat from things like Initial D.
Mm.
None of these songs would have seemed too unusual if you just happened to show them during uh, a Eurovision show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is less of like a parody of Eurovision as it is like a loving tribute.
Mm.
Also, I didn't really bother looking into who wrote this. I wouldn't be too surprised if they did turn out to be Icelandic or to know Icelandic people, because there's some details that had come up in my own writing that came up here, like the uh, the Demi Lovato character, the ringer. She
Mm.
comes from a small city called Keflavik, which in which was a big music scene in the 60s and 70s. It was actually called the Beatles town or the Beatles city locally because
Uh,
it had such like a rock scene,
mm.
which I ended up using in book 5 of my series. And it's like having her from there. They said, "Oh, she's great. She's from Keflavik." Like that was just taken as like, well, of course she's great. She's from the Beatles town.
Yeah.
So that encouraged that, or that validated that choice I had made creatively. Um, so so again, you're not exactly parodying Eurovision itself. It's more of like a loving send up, like
Yeah.
because I can't imagine that the big dance number in the middle we were meant to find weird or to laugh at, even though there was a lot of over the topness in there. I also got the impression that if we were more plugged into Europop, we would have gone, that's Sven Fjorgensen
Yeah.
or something like that. Just because you know how like when you're watching something and there's like a pause or like a lingering camera shot, and you're like, I'm supposed to know who that is.
Yeah.
Kind of like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in Airplane,
Yeah.
which they were eventually good enough in that movie to explain it, just in case you weren't following along.
Yeah. You try dragging Walton and Lanier up and down the court.
Now, as far as okay, so if they aren't really parodying Eurovision
Hmm.
per se, where's the humor coming from? Um, Funny voices.
Yeah,
You have two people who are not Icelandic putting on what I think are reasonable Icelandic accents
yeah.
and
They
saying certain things in weird orders.
yeah, and they are they do slip every now and then. I noticed they into their North American accents, but yeah, they yeah.
There's a decent setup with Rachel McAdams' character believes deeply in fairies, which is actually a fairly common belief in Iceland itself.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and Will Ferrell is like there's no such thing. Why you keep going? Yeah,
Uh,
she goes up to their little house.
she's made them some little houses, or
Yeah,
and she leaves them like food and wine and stuff.
yeah,
But that does eventually pay off in the end. Um,
yes.
so you got funny voices, you got a lot of pratfalls, so just a lot of
Hmm.
physical humor. Daniel mentioned before that for a good chunk of the movie they end up falling down, or like just every bad thing that can happen does happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, would you say this is an especially funny movie?
Uh, aside from like the pratfalls, not really.
Yeah, I couldn't quite tell. Like, okay, is this supposed to be a fairly straightforward story with a silly, like with some silly window dressing, or is this just a failed comedy?
Yeah,
Now, if you take it as just a fairly straightforward story with some silly window dressing, it's stronger on that basis.
yeah. I'd say so.
I could not laugh a minute. I will say that Will Ferrell's character is a bit unlikable, and
Hmm.
it is kind of his typical type where he's not a man child, like he's a man teenager, so like very selfish.
Yeah, yeah, it very much like I will say though he wasn't quite as over the top in this movie as he usually is in his movies. Like Ricky Bobby and oh, what was the other one? The figure skating one.
That's what this one kept reminding me of. It's like a spiritual successor to that one,
Yeah, yeah,
although with less homophobia.
yeah, yeah.
Let's see. Now, as far as I would say that the actual music itself is pretty good if you like Europop.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was one character we forgot to mention. The other the conflict was they you kind of have this little love triangle going between with Lars Sigrid and then this Russian singer um, whose name
Right.
is escaping me, but he was played by the guy from Downton Abbey. Um,
Well, we can just call him the Russian.
the Russian, yeah, who may or may not be gay. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
But as he assures us, there are no gay people in Russia.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh boy. um, but yeah. So like he's more encouraging of Sigrid than Lars, and Lars doesn't like that. And yeah.
That's the thing is that the movie is very much about Lars and Sigrid, and Sigrid has always kind of been Lars's little obedient puppy, and
Hmm.
this is about her growing outside of that.
Right. Yeah. Um,
Let's have a little bit of spoiler talk because I think
okay.
that uh, I will say that as far as disappointments go, I kind of wish the banker had been more of a constant presence because he does show up again to enact some evil, and we do find out he was the one who bombed the boat at the start to try to eliminate the entire delegation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I was yeah, I was kind of hoping it would be like in the Pink Panther when what was his name, the Inspector Dreyfus was always trying to kill Clouseau. I thought it'd do something kind of like that.
Right, or and mix that with like a springtime for Hitler type thing.
Yeah, yeah. Did we go right?
Right, exactly. And that is like that is a good tie-in where because Iceland got hit very hard in the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah,
Um, a lot of property speculation is my
yeah,
understanding, and a lot of currency speculation because they were a market that was I don't think they're in the EU, but at the very least they were EU friendly, but they didn't use the euro, so that made the Icelandic kroner like a place to speculate on if you were in Europe,
uh, yeah,
which meant that the price of the kroner got bid up and up and up and up and up until it wasn't.
yeah. Not good.
As I vaguely recall from classes 15 years ago or so.
Yeah,
Anyhow, the way he gets dealt with is kind of funny, but you know, I think that they could have milked some more conflict out of making him more of a character.
yeah, yeah. I think so too. Yeah, because it just kind of felt like shoehorned in.
Yeah, I think if I was going to give this a rating, not on like a 1 to 10 score, but more on like a where does it fall in? This is a classic Netflix movie where if this had been put out in theaters, it would have probably made like 20 million its entire run, and would have there would have been hand wringing headlines. Why can't Will Ferrell launch a movie anymore? And
Yeah, yeah,
but you put this kind of unchallenging schlock on Netflix, and it's just fine.
yeah.
I don't feel like my time was wasted. It just didn't have a whole lot of. It didn't bring the laughs quite as much, and it didn't have a lot of food for thought.
No, it didn't. Yeah, it definitely felt like Will Ferrell was trying to get back to his roots from the late 2000s and early 2010s, and it just didn't really work.
No, I would say this is perfect as like background noise because you won't miss a whole lot if you're just doing the dishes while this is on in the background.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's an accurate assessment.
Plus, with the frequent Eurovision songs, even if you're not paying attention to the story, you'll get some decent music to listen to.
It's true.
Um, I believe that is all we have to say about that one.
Yeah, I think we. Oh. There's one bit
Mhm.
that they do in there that really you couldn't figure it out why they were doing this bit until like the very end, and it was you know a lot of people think that Lars and Sigrid are brother and sister,
Mhm.
and then and so like, oh, are you brother and sister? And Sigrid's like, no, we're not, and Lars is like, well, we're probably not. We're like, what? And then it's not really not until the end of the movie you find out, well, that Lars's dad, who's Pierce Brosnan, guy who was James Bond, was a
Yeah,
bit of a Lothario,
yeah. His character took after him, so
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah. That was one of the better bits in the movie.
yeah, yeah.